audience that's out there either later or before. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Steve Blank. I'm the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media, which includes the Port Washington Times, as well as our website, theislandnow.com. And this afternoon, we're meeting with Adam Smith, Adam Block, Justin Renna, who are running together as a slate to oppose the 3 incumbents for the 3 seats that are open with the Port Washington School District Board of Education. So let me start by by you guys introducing yourselves. We'll start with, we have 2 Adams. So this is, I'll identify.
Start with him.
Let's go alphabetical. Mr. Block can go first. Might as well keep it consistent with all the forums.
Okay, so Adam Block, he's last name, he comes before you. So if you were in a classroom, Adam Block would go first. So we'll pick Adam Block.
Exactly.
Okay. So thank you for having me. This is great to talk to the people of the community. I'm going to keep this short. My name is Adam Block. I was born and raised in Port Washington. I went to Guggenheim, Weber, and Schreiber. So did my wife. My wife is now a physician at Northwell, and she works with many of you, and she takes care of some of you. I have 3 kids in Port Washington schools, twins, Brendan and Elise in Salem, who are in 3rd grade, and Jordan, who is a kindergartner in Salem. So I am here for the long haul. My parents live here. I was born and raised here. I am from Port Washington. So I really care about this school district. I started, go ahead.
And what do you have a career outside of
outside of running for school board? Sure, I have a couple, so I'll talk a little bit about all of them. I'm a public health professor, so I am an expert in a lot of the COVID issues. I've written several articles on COVID. I've written 3 children's books with my wife on COVID that we have given away for free. And I am an economist. I've worked for Congress before, developing budgets. And I also have a small business, Port Skis, where I rent skis to kids in town.
Okay, we'll keep with the Adam theme, and we'll go to Adam Smith.
Great. So I haven't been in Port Washington quite as long as Adam Block, but my wife and I moved here about 10 years ago. My parents also live in Port Washington. They moved here, I want to say, about 6 or 7 years before us. And actually, my sister moved to Port Washington about, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So we're also fully invested in Port Washington. I have 3 children. One is a rising 3rd grader who's been in Port Washington schools for the last 3 years. I have 2 younger children. One will be entering kindergarten this coming year, and the other one will be entering kindergarten the year after that. So in 2 years, I'll have 3 kids in the Port Washington schools. I also have 2 nieces who will be entering the Port Washington schools the following 2 years after that. So again, fully invested in Port Washington and fully invested in these schools.
Okay, and what do you do when you're not running for the Board of Education?
What do I do when I'm not running for the Board of Education? Not sleeping, I'll tell you that much. I work in real estate in New York City. I basically run a real estate development firm. I've been at this company for 12 years, and I was in real estate for another 3 or 4 years before that. My expertise are in construction, facilities management, budgeting, financial analysis, and technology. I also really focus on technology in our buildings, and that's a big focus of mine. I'm also on the board of a local of a local nonprofit. And my particular expertise there is that I'm in charge of the Emergency and Security Committee. So I've had a lot of experience, dealing with COVID over the last couple of, 18 months or so.
Okay. And Justin, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes. Yeah. My name is Justin Renna. I moved to Port Washington about 9 years ago. I live in the Manor Haven section with my wife, Randy. And my 2 children, Leah, who's a rising 6th grader heading to Weber next year, and my son, Jackson, who's going to be a rising 3rd grader. So I have those ties. I have nieces and nephews in the high school. So I'm going to be touching pretty much every school over the next couple of years. When I'm not running for the school board or planning rallies or doing all sorts of things, I coach for a living. I'm a high school football and track coach. I coach youth sports at all along Port Washington. And then I also sell air conditioning for one of the world's largest manufacturers of HVAC products. So I have a real good knowledge of how a building works, how ventilation in buildings work. And obviously I'm the only candidate who on a daily basis work with school-age children. And I do that pretty much 350 days a year.
Okay, so the three of you are running together. Why are you running? I don't know if this is a different answer between all of you or one. I'll throw it open to you guys to answer.
Sure. So I can start with this one. So like most parents in Port Washington, we moved here. We plan to raise our kids here. We really just assumed that Port Washington had really, really strong schools. And frankly, in a lot of ways they do. But after what happened last year with COVID, which we've talked about many times, everyone started paying a lot more attention. And when you really start to peel away the onion and really start paying attention, you see that you have a very small insular community who's been running the school district. It's a very insular board. They're not transparent. When you start talking to parents, you start hearing all kinds of stories about how they've reached out to the board and not heard back, or they, had this experience with the administration or another experience. And we really got to see that we don't feel that the current school board is a representation of the parent community, and certainly not a representation of the greater Port Washington community. And we had, because we organized the 5 Days for Port rally last year, we had a lot of people have been reaching out to us over the last few years, over the last, 16 months or so, encouraging us to run. And, we decided it was something that we really felt we had a moral obligation to do.
What was the 5 Days for Port? What was that? For those who may not be familiar.
Justin, that was your brainchild. So why don't you start with that?
Okay, yeah, I could do that. So 5 Days for Port. We, in Port Washington elementary schools, we're planning to go back for all in, as they would say, in August 2020. They said that we're all in, kids are going to be in 5 days a week. And then one August night, I remember coaching girls softball at Lions Field and listening to Dr. Hines say, well, the board and I have pivoted to a hybrid model. So within 24 hours, myself, Adam, a few other members of the community created this Facebook group to discuss what policies we can have our voices heard. We emailed, we called, we have had no success. We planned the rally within 4 days. We had ABC News, News 12, Newsday, and all the local media outlets show up to our rally. And I would say within a week, they pivoted back to the original plan, which was a hybrid, but then they set a date to get us all back in full time. So that's pretty much what 5 Days for Port was and still is.
So Adam, you're in public health. What was the unhappiness with how the district and the board responded to COVID?
So the unhappiness was basically that all the evidence pointed to the fact that we had a really successful summer at camp. Now, I don't mean me personally. Generally, you didn't hear about spread at camp. And so we said, okay, well, kindergartners, they cannot learn if they are not in a school environment. We saw that last year. Younger kids cannot learn if they are not in a school environment. They need to be physically there. That is part of it. And we also saw that the spread wasn't happening if kids were masked and they kept social distance and there were strict rules. Yet the school board decided this, yes, that is correct. And then all of a sudden they decided it wasn't correct. And we realized that our kids were going to have a very hard time if they were only in school 2 days a week, which is what the Weber kids were in school until the end of March. So from a public health perspective, all of the public health professionals, people I follow, Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, Ashish Jha, the dean of the School of Public Health at Brown, who's on CNN almost every day, and my boss, who is also Rob Amler, who's a former CDC epidemiologist who's on CNN almost every day. They all said the same thing. Kids need to be in school and the cost is too high. So we pushed for kids to be in school.
And I think one thing I just want to add to that, which I think is really important, is that the school district, the administration, the board came out at the end of the summer and said, we are opening the elementary schools 5 days because it's safe. We've met with our committees. We know that it's safe. We know it's the right thing. And Dr. Hines said, I know that the right place for the kids is to be in school 5 days. And then in a matter of 3 days, they flipped and went to a live streaming quasi hybrid plan that the teachers didn't like, the students didn't like, the families didn't like, and was completely, the antithesis of what the board and Dr. Hines had said about elementary kids belonging in school 5 days. So if they had started from the point that they had a logic argument for why 5 days couldn't work, our group never would have formed. But it was the fact that they came out with a highly thought out plan. It was a good plan. In fact, I emailed Dr. Hines to congratulate him for the plan when he first announced it. And I was so embarrassed for myself for congratulating him when 3 days later they flip-flopped because of pressure from who knows where. And I think that people have to understand that it's that flip-flop that started our energy, and not the fact that they just couldn't do 5 days and we were trying to force them to do 5 days, as has been purported previously.
Could that have been what was the explanation given? It seems that potentially it could be an issue with the teachers union.
To be honest, we never believed that. But if you look back at the communication that was put out by the district, I highly believe that they tried to leverage that they were blaming the teachers, although I don't actually believe that that was the true cause.
Okay, because there have been a number of instances around the country where teachers unions have pressed back, saying that it was not safe for them to be going into the schools.
We are not aware of any point where the teachers have publicly pressed back against it. We do know that when the district switched to the hybrid model, at the same time that we got upset, the Port Washington Teachers Association put out a letter very clearly saying that the hybrid plan that was proposed was a plan that they were not involved in and didn't make sense. So, again, we can't say what happened behind closed doors prior to the initial switch, but that's why we're running for board, is because we believe that the community is always entitled to know what's happening and why decisions like this that affect everybody are made.
Now, the incumbents have said, and they said we had a interview with them, that the protest actually hurt their efforts to get the schools open, and that there were things behind the scenes, such as school staffing and union things, that other members of the public were not aware of, and that was detrimental for the opening of the schools.
So I think what's really interesting is how much attention the incumbents are focusing on whether or not we were responsible for the return to 5 days. What I think they should be focusing on is the fact that they flip-flopped 2 times in a 2-week period when they had the entire summer to plan and collaborate with stakeholders and come out with a plan. Nothing really changed in the mid to late summer in terms of guidance. They like to talk a lot about guidance not coming out. I was on the board of this religious institution. I was planning return to work for many employees in different types of situations all around the city. And I can tell you what we did is we planned every day with the information that was available to us. And then when things changed, we changed our plans. What I believe the school district should be concerned about, and the board, is their own record. Why did they come up with a plan that they announced and defended? Why did they switch 3 days later? And if they're saying that that was what was necessary to make things happen behind the scenes, then I think that's what they should be concerned about. But I believe that the record speaks for itself. We've been very public about the timeline. And if you think that our protest harmed getting kids back 5 days, when within less than 2 weeks of our protest, they switch back to 5 days, I have a bridge to sell you.
Adam, was there anything from the CDC? And I understand that you mentioned a number of health officials that you work with that supported the opening, but this was at a time during the Trump administration where not everyone was in sync in terms of what should be done. Was there anything in this coming from the CDC saying that schools shouldn't be open?
So I don't recall anything. I'm not going to swear to that, but I certainly don't recall anything. But all of the experts that I know that are in the public health field saw things very clearly, which is what is the risk in terms of health of a spaced opening meaning that people are masked and they're adhering to all the protocols, versus the cost of having no school and keeping kids home for another 9 months or a year. And that cost was much higher. It was abundantly clear in virtually every expert.
Now, in the experience here from this, I guess, motivated you, the three of you, to have the protest and now to run for office. Is there anything else then that you saw once you all of a sudden look at the response to COVID? Were there other areas that you looked at and you also found lacking?
I mean, I think I'll defer to Adam on this one, but I think it's important for everybody to know that we're not running because of the 5 days for port, and we're not running because of the COVID response. I think that a lot of people, including the incumbents and our other challenger, have tried to paint us as the 5 day for port and that's our only issue. But I want to be very clear that has never been our issue. If you look at any of our campaign literature, we barely mention it. That's a very that's the history, and that's only relevant in showing one perfect example of why this current board needs to be changed. But it's only a very small piece of our platform. Adam, if you want to take that away, since I've been monopolizing the talking.
What are the other areas that that you found lacking with the current board and the three people you're running against?
So I think there is a general issue in terms of, so the first thing is the mission and vision that they're talking about, I think, is outside of what most parents in Port would consider mainstream education. They're talking about doing mission and vision work that is going to fundamentally change the way that our kids are educated and change the curriculums. I don't know that the teachers even know to the extent that it is going to change. And so I'm concerned about it. I've seen some examples of it online, and it is not in line with the way that I would view traditional math and science needs to be taught to our kids.
What specifically is it? What do you see specifically that you see as out of the mainstream?
So let me pull up if I can. So some of the criteria that are going to be used is so the criteria is using this NYU Metro program that most people aren't familiar with, that the school board hasn't really made public. They talk about it in their meetings, but there's really no plan that they're talking about. They're just going to vote on it. And it is not in line. There's no time that the board has talked about improving math, improving science, improving the teaching of history and social studies and all those things that we deem important. They're singularly focused on one area of teaching and one style of teaching.
Okay. And anything else, Adam Smith or Justin, that you...
Sure. So, I've been digging a lot over the last few months, and I've been putting out, little videos and pieces of information. And, if you look at our rankings, and I'm going to use it as an example, US News and World Reports, over the last 5 years, Port Washington's ranking has literally dropped off of a cliff. Now, to be very clear, a big part of that was the rankings changed, how US News and World Reports does their rankings changed between 2018 and 2019. So that we had our biggest, steepest drop between those 2 years. We went from 223 to 705. And now we've hung out, a little bit. We keep dropping a little bit. But if you look at all of the neighboring districts on the North Shore, nobody had a drop like that. Some of them actually went up. Others went from, in the mid 150s to the high 100s. We went from 223 to 705. Now that's important because while some people in this town, it may not be a priority for them. Certainly it isn't for the people on the board. They've been quite clear about that. People are looking at that. It matters for college admissions. It matters on Zillow when people look and they want to see the quality of the schools. That impacts property values. It impacts business. So while the current board, it may not be a priority for them to focus on traditional academic excellence as is viewed by universities and national rankings agencies, what they view as traditional excellence, it should be really important to people who have kids in the school district. It should be really important to homeowners, and it should be really important to business owners in Port Washington. And the current board, the incumbents who are running, who have no children inside of the district, this school district can be an experiment. They can do whatever they want, and it doesn't impact them. They can work with consultants from NYU who want to bring new teaching methods in, and maybe that helps our kids get into college. Maybe it doesn't. But the reality is, these individuals have been on the board for 10 years, some of them more. If you actually look, the minority and underserved populations that they purport to be trying to help, the outcomes for those individuals have declined recently in Port Washington under this board's tenure. So while they say that we're not looking out for those individuals, under their tenure, outcomes have dropped for everybody, underserved and not underserved. So
now is the U.S. News and World Report, is that considered do you guys consider that to be a good metric to measure?
I look at U.S. News. It's not about what we consider to be a good measure. It's about what the country considers to be a good measure. And those metrics do matter. But we're not only looking at U.S. News and World Reports. There's extensive information available from NYSED, New York State Education Department, on many different factors, including Regents performance, AP performance, AP participation, graduation rates for minority students. And I'm working on a very detailed analysis, which I am going to publish. Hopefully I can do so before the election, but anybody can get all of this information publicly. And you will see that we are doing worse than our neighbors on the North Shore by almost every measure, including the performance of underserved communities. And we're declining as well.
In terms of part of this is also dollars. Port this year will be spending about $30,000 per student. You've got the Great Neck district that is about $37,000 per district. So do you think that has something to do for that? Do you think that Port taxpayers are not getting the bang for the buck, or they're getting what they paid for?
So listen, I like that you just said bang for the buck, because that's a word that I used and was tried to be turned against me in the League of Women Voters debate. Port is not getting bang for the buck. Now, the incumbents tried to defend themselves by saying, of course they're getting bang for the buck. We have one of the lowest per pupil costs in the district. But to me, bang for the buck doesn't mean that I bought the cheapest thing and it works the worst. Bang for the buck means that I'm kind of like spending a good amount of money to get a good result, good return on investment. I'm not the cheapest, I'm not the most expensive, but I'm getting really good use out of my dollars. So of course, money is a factor and money plays into things. And if you want to hire the best teachers and you want to have the best teacher development and you want to have state-of-the-art schools and state-of-the-art technology, of course you need money, right? Money matters. But at the same time, priorities matter as well. And the question is, with the dollars we're spending, are we getting the best bang for our buck? And you don't see that conversation happening at the current board meetings. In fact, if you watch these board meetings, it's very high level. It's a lot of approving agenda items, but you don't ever see any talk about what metrics, what KPIs, key performance indicators, are we tying our district to, and how are we testing where we're spending our money and what type of return on investment we're getting. And that's what I propose, and what my colleagues Adam and Justin propose, is really taking a deep look. And it's not just about zero-based budgeting. It's about tying everything in this school district to accepted educational performance metrics and changing on a regular basis. It's not just about a strategic plan. It's about micro analysis of where the dollars are being spent and what type of return on investment we're getting on that money. We shouldn't just assume something is good because teachers want it or parents want it or administrators want it. We should assume something is good because we test it and it's analytically shown to be working and a good use of our dollars.
We had a conversation just before with Nanette Melkonian, and she got involved because of her concern about an over-reliance on standard tests. I guess, which raised the question of, well, what metrics do you use to evaluate the district and even teachers in terms of how they're doing? what metrics do you have a problem? Because there were a lot of opt-outs throughout Nassau County from math and English standardized tests. On the other hand, what is the question then is, well, how are you going to evaluate it in comparing things? And you've mentioned not only for the actual education, but there's a financial involvement because of how one district compares with another parent. So what would be what metrics, without getting too deep in a dive in this, but what metrics should be top line in terms of evaluating whether the kids are being taught well in the district?
So,
Adam, you take this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in on this, and then Justin, maybe you want to talk some about your experience, because evaluation is fundamental in the area of sports, right? And it's tricky, and it's not something that we do perfectly. But that said, you generally get it mostly right, and you got to do it. So I'm a health economist, so I work in the very tricky area of evaluating how physicians are performing. In how, right? And physicians are tricky because they have some sicker people, they have some healthier people, and they're all trying to do a good job. Just like teachers, they have some students that need a little more help, some students that need less help, some students that need to be pushed ahead, and they're all trying to do their best. That said, there is an enormous variation on the scale of how they perform. And so we need to pick a method for both teachers and students, and we need to stick to it. And we need to improve and refine those, and we don't need to, but we got to do something, because the alternative that I'm hearing a lot of times is you do something holistic, but to me, that is not putting any kind of number on anything, and that is basically not, that's not an evaluation. So that is doing a disservice to our students. So I'll give you an example. My kids are taking the ELA this year. They have the option to opt out, and I fully support the option for many parents to have their children opt out of the ELA. However, I chose to have my kids take it because I want to make sure that when I get their test scores back, they are on a trajectory that I want them to be on. And if they're not, I want to know about it. And I recognize that the ELA is not a perfect test. No test is perfect, but testing is a part of life. My wife, she had to take the medical school boards, right? I think we are probably all happy that she took and passed the medical school boards. So this is going to be a part of life, whether it's early or down the line. I think you have to do some kind of testing. You recognize that they're not perfect, but you do your best with them, rather than just saying testing is sometimes biased, and so we're going to not test it all.
Justin, you're a coach, so this is you're making judgments on kids, play them, and to who makes the team, and etc. So from your perspective.
So like Adam, I know a lot of people who opted out of the test this year. I had my daughter take both tests this year, mainly because test taking and results are part of life. And as a coach, I made tough decisions of cutting players. I've made tough decisions of benching players and not playing athletes. And it's tough. But at the end of the day, this is something that is needed. And I know school sets you up for the real, quote unquote, real world. And in the real world, there are not standardized testing, but there are tests every day you're faced with. And children and parents, I personally think you need to face those hard realities sometimes. And yes, are the tests perfect? Not at all. Are coaches perfect? Not at all. I've made numerous mistakes in my life. Michael Jordan got cut from his freshman basketball team. Like, coaches make mistakes, tests make mistakes. However, at the end of the day, 80 to 90% of the time, they're accurate, and they provide a very good measuring stick as to where you are in your life and where you are educationally.
In terms of what other issues in terms of well, let me ask you this. There's three of you now are running, you're taking on three incumbents. So the question is, well, is that really something that we want to change three people all at one time? That we have this big turnover and lose the institutional knowledge of what these people who have been on the board for years know? How do you respond to people who are concerned about that?
Can I take this one first, guys?
Go ahead, Justin.
So, as a coach, you got to remember there are 7 members to the board here. So even if we replace 3 of them, there are still going to be 4 members who have been on the board with minimal 3 years of experience. So it's not like there are 3 seats, only 3 seats, and we're trying to replace everything that's been there. So even if all 3 of us win, there'll still be 4 remaining board members that are currently serving. Now, working on coaching staffs of all varying sizes, from 2 coaches all the way up to 9, like my current coaching staff, there are going to be differences of opinions, but sometimes you need that new fresh blood to come in with different points of views, and not just the status quo where you're just going to say at the board meeting, okay, yeah, we'll discuss at a later point. No. Public board meetings are there for discussion, and the town's going to tune in to hear what board members have to say. So I think replacing 3 members who have been on the board and served and have done an adequate job over the years, I think it's time for some new blood to give some new ideas to the board. Now you guys can take it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's a little, it would be really nice, for the incumbents for us to say, yeah, they have the experience, so they should stay on the board. But we live in a democracy, and these are elected positions. And if the public doesn't feel that those individuals are serving them, then the public has a right and an obligation to replace them. Just like when you have a president that you don't think that the public doesn't think is serving them, you replace the president, and an entire administration changes overnight. That's, thousands, if not tens of thousands of jobs are changed, new department heads, new 2nd tier and 3rd tier and 4th tier department heads. And somehow the country always moves on after an administration change. This is a school district. It's happening at the micro level. You're not changing an administration. You're just talking about changing 3 of 7 board members. I think it's a fundamental tenet of democracy. And frankly, I don't think that there's really that concern holds any water.
In terms of the role of board members, the board members get to choose the superintendent, and then the superintendent is hiring everybody and below. What do you consider the role of as board members of the input? There's people that can be accused of micromanaging. There's people that can be accused of turning a blind eye and turning everything over to the superintendent. What do you see as the proper role of board members in the operation of the school district?
So I think the board serves a policy function in that it sets policy. I think a lot of policy is actually set through the budget. And so, the policy is made by allocation decisions that are made in the budget. I also think that Dr. Hines, our current superintendent, is a servant of the district, and he knows what he's doing. And by knowing what he's doing, he is going to respect the fact that there may be a change in board members and board makeup. And if there's a change in board makeup, I expect that he will change some of the direction to reflect that. In other words, he will reflect the will of the people of the community. And so I think that will be not a problem at all.
So let me ask you this, given the fact that you 3 were so critical of handling of this very important issue of school openings and how of COVID, is that not an implicit criticism of the superintendent? And is his job on the line if you guys get elected?
No, I don't think that's fair to say. We've been asked this question by a lot of people, and we were certainly not on the inside of that happening. So we can't say specifically, that one individual should be held to blame. If any of us get on the board, and I certainly speak for myself, Dr. Hines will have my full support and have the opportunity to work with myself and the new board and show that, he's, like Dr. Block said, that he's prepared to follow the will of the community and, work with the board. And I have every expectation that that's exactly what he would do. I certainly am not prepared to stand here and say that Dr. Hines should fall for, what happened under the board's leadership on COVID. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, the buck has to stop somewhere.
He has been presented as somebody with innovative ideas. Is that, and that he's come in to bring in some of the fresh ideas from his previous district and different way of doing things. Is that consistent with your concerns with the making sure that the traditional approach is respected in how the school district is run?
So one of you guys want to take that, or should I?
I think we'll have to see. I'll have to see what those specific ideas are, because quite honestly, one of the fundamental issues that this board currently has is a lack of transparency. Everything is done behind closed doors, and they don't, right? So all the mission and vision work that they're talking about, they get talked about occasionally, at meetings, but not specifically. And I don't see anything on paper as to what's going to happen. So I had to dig in. They talk about NYU Metro. I had to go to NYU Metro's website, not Port Washington Union Free School District website, to NYU's Metro to find out what on earth they were talking about. And so I think one thing that we are going to fix is transparency. What you hear is a ton of parents that will email the district and literally hear nothing back. I got involved in this actually a little bit before Justin and Adam did. I got involved 3 years ago because my son in kindergarten had a teacher that was out 36 times. 36 times. Did the district tell me? No. I found out from a 5-year-old, and I found out from a bunch of other people in the district. And what we did was, and then I heard that this was a common theme with this one teacher, and that there was year after year after year after year, and nothing was being done about it. So we did what we could, which was we talked to the teacher, we talked to the principal, and then we wrote a letter signed by just about every parent in the class and sent it to the school board and the superintendent. And I went in to a school board meeting physically and read the letter to them. And do you know what they said in response? Nothing. Zero. I have received zero response. And they will talk to you about regulations and all of that as to why they can't and why they didn't and why they wouldn't. But a large part of their job is communicating with the community, and they didn't do that. It wasn't in my case. I was the representative of one class, of 1 year, and they did not do their job. So we are going to do something forward for transparency, because every parent deserves to feel listened to by the Board of Education.
So how would you implement transparency? What does that look like? What are you saying needs to be done? Because that's something that's commonly a common criticism of school boards and school administration. What should be the expectation? What should be the school district doing to communicate with people?
So here's what I think that we can do. Number one, the board will tell you, we have a policy that says that we will let you talk. Sometimes they didn't let anybody talk at board meetings for 13 months. Now they do again. All of a sudden there's an election and they let people talk again. But now they let you talk, but they don't respond to you. There is no reason for that to be the policy. That is literally a made up policy that most boards don't have. So we can change that policy. The second thing is that because I don't think that's enough. I actually loved what Dr. Hines did, and I took him up on it before COVID happened for Caffeine with Mike. I had a meeting with Michael Hines in February of 2020. We talked about crossing guards at Salem, and we had a nice sit down. We had a one-to-one conversation for 15 or 20 minutes. It was really nice. I have never had the opportunity to do that with a board member. In fact, the only communication I hear with board members are friends that happen to live next door to them or down the street will get texts related to them. There's no back and forth with boards. So what we have said that we are going to do, Justin, Adam, and I, and we'll welcome any other members of the board that want to do this, is have an office hours once a month where we sit outside or have a Zoom meeting, and you can come and talk to us about your issues.
As individuals.
And we will respond.
Yeah. As individuals.
We will respond.
Not,
we won't just listen.
Yeah. And also, another thing is, good luck coming into kindergarten in this district and figuring out who you're supposed to call about what. So yep. I've talked about having some type of feedback loop where the district can understand the type of feedback that's coming in, and the parents can get responses from the district. So I think, there's a lot of there's technologies you can implement, ticket tracking systems, just like, many companies and organizations are using today to follow, complaints, questions, requests, understand how those are coming in, see how long they're taking to be responded to, whether it's to teachers, principals, nurses, assistant principals, board members, administration, transportation department, basically just across the school district. there's all kinds of horror stories of people not knowing where to go for what. So I think number one is you should create a web page saying who to call for what. Number two, you should put it online and put a tracking system attached to it. Number three, you should publicize the metrics on the tracking system of how long it's taking people to get responded to. And number three, actually make sure that you're answering all of these questions that people are putting in, and not just having them go into a black hole of a tracking system. Further to what Dr. Block was saying, absolutely. If I'm elected, I fully commit, just like Adam and Justin does, to having these open meetings. Again, these would be as meetings as individuals, not in a capacity as a board member. So you can only say, just because of open meeting law, et cetera. So we can only say, what we believe as an individual, and that we will bring things to the official board or to the correct administrator to the channel. But then when somebody brings you something as a board member, you actually need to make sure that the correct administrator, in what the current board likes to refer to as the chain of command, you have to make sure that the chain of command is actually following up on the issue. If a community member comes to a board member with an issue, there's a reason that they've brought it to a board member. It means that they weren't getting satisfaction in the chain of command. So it's the obligation of the board member to hear them out, forward it to the correct person in the chain of command, and then make sure that it's being addressed. Doesn't mean that the constituent is correct, but they have the right to be heard and have their issue followed up with, and have the board member actually make sure that they gave them a voice.
Okay, is there anything else? This is obviously these elections, and I always value as the publisher and editor of local newspapers, we always consider the school election as the most important. There's more money involved, and there's the kids involved. So, and as you mentioned, Adam, there's also the property values that are involved. Here in Port Washington, it's a budget of $167 million, and it's about 5,500 plus children that are in there. Are there any additional, which tends to be incidentally on the North Shore, you're on the lower end of the spending, but are there other issues that you think, have we covered all the issues that you think are important for voters to consider when they're making their decision?
So
Listen.
I'm just going to talk real quick. Adam and Adam know this about me. So I was very, even after the 5 days report, I was very hesitant to run for the Board of Election Education, and I didn't think I had the time or whatnot. And after sitting down for a while, realizing what I can do and how I arrange my work schedule, I'm able to do it. But what really set me over the top was, as a coach, seeing the middle school sports season shut down by the administration, and being a part of another North Shore school and being a part of those BOE meetings, and seeing the BOE advocate for middle school athletes and middle school clubs to resume, really made me realize that why isn't Port Washington advocating for their 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and giving them an outlet? And then we hear from people as well, because the COVID numbers keep rising. Well, it's because we're not giving the athletes and the drama students and the musicians that chance after school to stay in a safe environment, to be with their friends and do something they love. So they walk down Main Street and they do stuff and they congregate when they should. So that's really where it got me, was why are middle school sports, why are middle school clubs not happening the way they are in other neighboring districts? Another thing is, Port Washington is one of 5 districts on Long Island that are still not letting parents of visiting teams at athletic events at the high school level come watch their athletes participate. That is mind-blowing to me. We're outdoors, we're playing outdoor sports. We have youth sports happening all over the country, and hundreds of people are watching it, and there's never an issue. So those are the 2 big things that I really don't understand, and what really lit my fire again to run for this. So I really just want to advocate for the athletes, the extracurriculars, the musicians, the dancers, the drama students, and give them that outlet that they deserve and that they lost as middle school students this year.
Yeah. So
can I
go ahead, Adam?
Can I? Yeah. Well, I want to build, because what Justin's talking about is a bit of a public health discussion, and I could not agree more with his perspective on it. I want to add a couple of other things that we have been missing that need to come back, and we haven't seen the expertise on the school board, or them even trying to use some of the expertise that's available in the community. So my kids can't take out library books. Come on, they can't take out library books. Like, the science has been clear on this for a very long time. And they talk about equity, but what could be more inequitable than not providing kids school library books? You know, we have expertise in town. The head of pediatric infectious diseases at Northwell is a resident of Port Washington and has grandchildren in the school district. I reached out to him and he said, sure, I would love to come talk to you. Has the school board reached out to him? No, they haven't. So we have expertise that we're not using. We're not thinking creatively, and we're not leveraging some of the I think we need some more expertise, because we need to be reopening things. A month that school sports, if school sports don't happen for 2 months, that's a season. That's one of like 4 seasons that a high school athlete could have. So this is a big deal. And we need to be turning on a dime with this stuff.
Adam Smith?
Sure. You know, I think at the end of the day, this election comes down to 3 words. And, you know, Steve, if you look, sorry, my headset took a call that's coming in. I think if you open up your upcoming newspaper, you're going to see our ad, and it has 3 words in it. And that's what everything comes down to: transparency, accountability, and excellence. That's what this election is about: transparency, accountability, and excellence. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about each of those. Transparency. We've already talked a lot about transparency, but let's just take an example. Just last week, the school district sent out a survey to parents. They didn't explain the context of the survey. They just said, how do you feel about desk shields coming down? Now, the minute I read this, I said to myself, oh my God, there's going to be a revolt when these results come out, because people are going to think this was a vote. They didn't qualify it. They just asked people, you know, they didn't talk about what their decision process would be. They just said, here's a survey. So then, of course, the results came back, and I think it was something like 60% of parents wanted the desk shields to come down. So they said, here's the results of the survey. 60% of parents want the desk shields to come down. I think it was something like 60% of teachers wanted the desk shields to come down. And then they said, but we're not taking the desk shields down. So this was like, people said, wait, people thought this was a vote, and they went nuts. And it just created it's created stress on people that was so preventable and so unnecessary, because I don't even know why, just because there was no transparency in the process, but it was just so common sense that that was how it was going to be interpreted. So if they were transparent, they would have explained, look, we're really not sure what we want to do. The CDC is saying that the desk shields can come down, but we know people aren't comfortable with it. So we just want to get a sense of how the community feels as we make these evaluations. This is not a vote. And they would have been transparent and everybody would have understood. But instead, they created this great anxiety for people and anger because they felt that their voices weren't heard. That's just one example that even when trying to be transparent, they haven't been successful in being transparent. Number 2 is accountability. Accountability means acknowledging our mistakes and taking responsibility for them. This board, particularly the 3 incumbents, it's always excuses. It's always why they can't, why not, why it is the way it is. The budget is, you know, one of the incumbents loves to talk about how the budget is 92%. You can't change it, right? It's all salaries, but that's not true, because yeah, maybe you can't change the salaries and the contractual obligations, but the district can control how they use those salaries, what's being taught, where are what are the priorities for all of those staff members who comprise that 92% of the budget. So I think it's a little bit misleading and disingenuous to talk about how only 6% of the budget is actually fungible, because even though you have 92% or whatever, 92%, I think, staff and transportation, there's a lot of flexibility in how you use that staff and transportation. So we need metrics for accountability, and we need to make sure that the way that we're allocating all of our resources is operating efficiently, and we're getting the best bang for the buck of that 92% of the budget, which is fixed. And the last piece is excellence. Excellence means excellence for all. It means excellence for underserved. It means excellence for kids who are just getting by. It means excellence for kids who are performing, at the middle percentile in the district, and it means excellence for the kids who are performing at the top. And I've said this before, equity is excellence for all. And you never see excellence come up. You never see it talked about by the current board. And if you care about excellence and you believe that the core mission of a school district is to educate our kids and help them learn the most, and especially about skills that they'll need, such as math, science, coding, technology, art, music, things that they're going to need to be fully enriched adults for the rest of their lives, if you believe that's the true mission of this school district, then that is not something that's being talked about today.
So let me ask you one final question, and it may cover what you just covered right now, Adam, which is, why should the three of you be elected to the Port Washington Board of Education?
The real reason is because this is not something that any of us planned. We don't have the pedigree that we've been planning the past several years of our lives on a path to be on the school board. We didn't have a long entrenched desire to be on the school board. We're not school insiders, so we're not going to follow the beaten path, and we're not rubber stamps. We're just three parents who are highly invested in this school district. We're at three different schools. We're in three different neighborhoods. We're from three different walks of life, and we agree on one thing, and that is that schools are for the kids, and schools are for the town, and schools are for the future. And we believe that we're prepared to break down doors. We're prepared to work with the teachers. We're prepared to work with the other board members. We're prepared to work with all of the stakeholders in Port Washington to make sure that Port Washington schools are the best that they can possibly be, with no preconceived notions, no agendas, no ideology, only asking tough questions, asking difficult questions, learning, researching, and really facing the future, and making sure that every single child who graduates from Port Washington schools is prepared to face their future.
Anyone else care to add anything?
Yeah, I'll say something. Yeah, I'll say something, Steve. Why us? I mean, like Adam said, we are not what the board is right now. And I'm not saying that the board is awful. I think the board has done over the years a great job. We're something different. And coming from my sports background, when things aren't working, the coaching staff normally gets replaced. If you're a college football team and your rankings keep dropping, they replace the football staff and they hire a new coach and they bring in new coordinators. Well, Dr. Hines came in 2 years ago, and I think it's time that he needs some people working with him that are going to change the questions that are being asked and not just keep the same questions. And when we get asked questions, we're going to give different answers than what he's getting. We are what Port Washington is now. We are parents. We have kids. I know, I'll speak for myself. I spend 20 hours a week at Lions Field in Port Washington coaching hundreds of kids that aren't mine. And it's what I love to do. I'll look around even when my kid's not playing. I'll help out. I'll coach anyone. I want to help the kids of this community become great, become excellent at whatever they want. And I think that's what all three of us bring, that desire to see our children and the children of this community succeed in life moving forward.
Okay, Adam Block, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, very briefly. I don't think that the board reflects the community at large, and our perspective, which I know is at least 1,000 people, if not many thousands of people, is not reflected at all on the board. So we're running because we've been ignored for a very long time, and very clearly ignored. And we just want a seat at the table to discuss the educational future of all of our kids. It's time for a change.
Okay, well, I want to thank the slate of three challengers in the Port Washington, Adam Smith, Adam Block, and Justin Renna, for taking their time out to spend with us to discuss this. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be this discussion was streamed to our YouTube page where it was recorded. It will be accessed. You can access it anytime now. To link to it, there'll be a link from Facebook. We'll be sending out an email. So we hope everybody, as many people in Port Washington, get to see this before the election on May 18th. I'm going to invite people to subscribe to our YouTube page, also to like us on our Facebook page. And also, I want to give a thanks to Rob Pelez, our reporter, who is behind the scenes. His name appears on the bottom, and he's handling the mechanics here to keep everything on track. Rob will also be writing a story. He'll actually be writing several stories this week. One on this conversation with 3 of our challengers, as well as a overall story announcing that people are going to the polls, the budget numbers, and some of the other information. So I hope that you will also follow Rob's story and his reporting. It'll also be online on our website, The Island Now. That story may be up in a day or 2. We got to see what Rob's schedule is today, but as soon as we can get that done, it'll go online first. Also, I just wanted to let everybody know that our Blank Slate Media's monthly town hall this month is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be May 20th. This one is going to be a round table with 4 of our, I guess we have something like 11, 12 columnists who will be in the paper: George Marlin, Adam Haber, Jerry Kremer, Karen Rubin, who represent different points of view on the political spectrum. So I am sure that you'll be interested. We do have a number of other columnists actually from Port Washington: Judy Epstein, many of you will know, as well as a number of our writers on the environment, Patty Wood, among others. And hopefully we will be presenting them in the future. So again, I thank everybody for watching and for participating with us, and best of luck as the election moves forward.
Thanks so much.